What's up guys, Go Rodeo Gaming here, back with another video from Transport Fever 2. Today I wanted to show you guys how to build realistic freight trains. Now this is pertaining to freight trains in the United States. Today we're on my Tehachapi loop map, which is available on the workshop, so go check that out. Pretty much all built it by hand in the digital sense. No height map. Here's the loop itself. Turned out pretty good, and it includes all the tunnels, pretty much all the realistic sidings. Not every single realistic siding, but I got it pretty close. So anyways, let's get back to what we are supposed to be doing in this video, and that's how to build a realistic US freight train. Now they do have to be built certain ways based on weight and all that good stuff. You want pretty much, I think the rule was 70% of all the weight needs to be up basically at the head of the train. So there are specifics of how to literally build a real train, but I'm not going to go into that amount of detail because it just wouldn't, it's just not necessary. So I just want to give you guys a good idea of how to build a realistic train, a realistic looking train, because obviously in this game you can't change what cars are where depending on if they're loaded or unloaded, so that's why we're not going to get into the complete specifics. But I will point you guys in the right direction. So it looks like we got a manifest coming up here right now. Got some SD9s. Did some custom weathering. You can kind of tell. Looks kind of dirty and old. So that's kind of cool. So here's a good example. Typically your heaviest loaded cars are going to be at the head of the train. The head of the train being right behind the consist. The consist being the locomotives on the front of the train. Typically you'll have loaded box cars, loaded hoppers, just like we're seeing right here. You don't typically see loaded tank cars up here unless they are a, what's the right term? It depends what it's filled with, right? We have hazmat specific rules as well on the railroad. I was a former Union Pacific conductor, so these were things that we had to know. So typically you won't see tank cars up here unless it's something that, if the car was punctured and it leaked out or caught fire, wouldn't be that big of a deal. So what I do is I pretty much leave tank cars off the front of the trains in this game. Like I said, it's rare, so I just kind of let it be. So yeah, typically have loaded box cars, hoppers, even some center beams, loaded center beams. It's all about loaded weight. So typically I'll kind of interchange the box cars for the hoppers being up front and the box cars being in the back. Or I'll build it like this. Sometimes I'll put a few auto racks up front. That happens here and there where you have some loaded auto racks that are on the head of the train. So just keep that in mind. Once I'm done explaining this, I will build a realistic train for you guys and show you what I like to do. So tank cars are usually about mid-train towards the back. In this case it's the back for me. We got some steel cars. So I know, and I kind of keep in mind how this game works. There's a lot of commodities that can go in the box cars, the hoppers, and the bulks. So that's why I kind of build it that way too, because typically they'll be loaded if you're going back and forth, if there's enough freight both directions. Now with something like these coil cars, they can only take steel. I think that's the case. I'll have to look when we build the train. So typically they might only be loaded going one way, so they're going to go towards the middle, the back of the train. So what I least commonly have loaded will probably be towards the middle or rear of the train in this game. So yeah, just some things to think about. Let's go on down here and see what else we got going on. We got what you would call a Z train right here, which is high priority basically truck trailers and containers. So in this case, it's all just flat cars. Can't really do anything about that in this game. So here's a good example of some of the tunnels. We even got the cable crossovers, I believe is what these are called. Bealville crossovers, my bad. This is how the crossovers actually look in real life. Now, keep in mind this was themed on the mid-80s, how the SP had it, so there has been some double track and all that since. Here's a stack train. I'll show you guys also how to build a correct intermodal train if you're looking to do pretty long ones up towards 10,000 feet. So we'll do that. Got a Caliente here with the famous kind of horseshoe curve. So yeah, let's go down here in the Bakersfield. Put quite a bit of work here. Here's another Z train. And let's build ourselves a manifest train. We got a local working here. This is the little kind of town of Edison, kind of farming community, some old industries. Pretty cool. Gotta love those SD9s. Looks like we got another stack train. Alright. So if we were to go in here, put however many locomotives, obviously. It's a steep route, so let's just put some more modern power on it. That's one thing that's kind of unrealistic about this game is the weight of some of the cars, especially when they're loaded. Like a coal train, like let's say I do a real mile-long coal train. It only weighs, I think, about 6,000 tons, or in real life, it's about 14 to 15,000 tons. So that's where maybe the modders get it a little wrong. So I did actually kind of go in and into my files and edit the weight of the cars myself to try to make it easier. So you could always try to do that if you want. So yeah, so let's say these more modern hoppers, it'd be good to put these up front. Now it's important to remember too that cars usually come in blocks, is what we call it. So there's blocks of cars that are all going to the same destination, the same industry. So if you have, let's say, some soda ash in these hoppers, they most likely came from the same industry and are going to the same industry as well. So then there'll be a block. So that's how trains are built. They're built in blocks. They put these cars going to this place together and so on and so on. And if there's an industry that has, let's say 2 or more cars going the same destination, they're all together in the train most of the time. So you can call that a block of cars. So we can count on that being loaded in real life. These cars would be very heavy. Got so much stuff here. Then you got, your box cars. Have a block of box cars. I like to kind of mix it up. Make it look a little different. Maybe use some different variations of box cars. So let's say these are all heading for Mojave, which is on this route. So next, as I look through, let's just go to cargo to make it easier on us. You could have a different block of hoppers. Maybe a little smaller block. It's coming from like a smaller farm or grain mill. Then you could put some tankers in there. Have a block of tank cars, all going the same destination. Typically they're the same type of cars. I'm just kind of mixing it for looks, but if you want to be realistic too, typically the tank cars are all pretty much the same, from the same manufacturer. They kind of look the same. And then here, if you want to add in some traditional coal cars, which you don't see a whole lot on manifests, you do see it. It's not uncommon, but I wouldn't say it's common either. You'd want this to be towards the head of the train as well, or at least towards the middle. So say there's a block of 6 coal cars. Typically they're empty because typically with like coal or iron ore or gravel, you typically are going to get that in a unit train. A unit train being a train that has only one commodity. Coal train, grain trains, oil trains, that type of thing. Then you might have some, have some bulkheads, lumber, in this case construction material, steel. It's normal to have your occasional flat cars. These typically will go towards the middle to end of the train because whatever they're loaded with is pretty light, or they are often unloaded as well. Got some gondolas probably towards the middle end of the train is where I kind of like to put them. So I'm just trying to keep in mind, knowing from the paperwork that I saw over the years I worked on the Union Pacific, you always see the tonnage of the cars, and typically hoppers and all that were around 100 tons if they're loaded. Coal cars around 100 tons, or even more at times. So that's how I kind of distinguish to build my trains, but obviously the majority of you guys didn't get to see that paperwork, so I just kind of rate it in levels. I kind of give each car like a rating, and then that's how I build a manifest train. Alright, so I think we'll get rid of this. Now I want to go through intermodal, so stack trains, double stack trains, whatever you want to call them. We'll use some more modern power. Let's see, did this show up? Oh yeah, it showed up. Wow, how about that? Let's see. Did some SD40Rs. Unfortunately, I had some miscommunication with some modders, so they got kind of mad at me, even though I didn't know that I was doing something wrong. So these are basically all private to me now. There's usually a protocol to go through. I wasn't aware of that for modding in other games, so yeah, that caused a whole firestorm, but that's all good. So we'll use some more modern power. So we'll do our, oh, that's backwards. We don't want that. So let's say we put 5 units on the head end of this stack train. Now I'm going to build a longer stack train like what we have the last few years, more modern. Another tip I like to do is change your distances to feet. This makes it a lot easier for knowing what size trains can fit into sidings, of knowing how long your train is. We did everything in feet on the Union Pacific, feet and tons and all that good stuff. So keep this in mind. So in this game, when you have an intermodal train, they're very heavy. They're very heavy because they can hold so much capacity. So it's kind of funny. When you build a manifest train in this game, there's manifest trains that I've seen that could be, 10 to 12,000 tons that, are maybe 6, 7, 8,000 feet long. So that's pretty heavy. Where if you have an intermodal train that same length, they're more around probably the 6 to 9,000 tons. So they're quite a bit lighter on average, but this game, the basically the modders, they haven't made the manifest cars heavy enough when they're loaded. But like I said, with the capacity that you have with these double stack cars, it makes it super heavy. So these intermodal trains in this game are the heaviest trains that you can build on Transport Fever 2. Having said that, if you want to run like a mile long train, so let's say, yeah, we're almost at a mile right here. Realistically, you can get away with just power on the head end, right? Because you have what the couplers can handle and you have what the drawbar can handle. That determines where you're going to place DPUs, whether mid-train, into the train. It determines how many locomotives you can have on the head end, right? So like going up the cone pass, I think with the modern power, which is what we're using here, these Dash 9s, I think you can only have 3, maybe 4 units on the head end if you want to make it really realistic according to the route. Because if you have too many locomotives on the head end, then you're going to rip a drawbar out of the car, or you're going to get a knuckle. So a knuckle's going to break off. So your train's going to break in half, or it's going to break up here. So let's just call it 4 for the sake of realism for this route. Now, certain routes have certain restrictions on how much power you can have on the head end of the train, depending on the gradient, the curvature of the tracks, all that stuff. Now, with Tehachapi being a very steep grade, probably averaging about 2.5%, which is very steep, um, and having tight curves, since it's kind of switchbacking up the side of a mountain to Tehachapi, they can only you can only have so much power on the head end before all those in-train forces from the gradient, from the curves, will just shear a knuckle or rip a drawbar clear out of the car. So if I were to be using older power, so like SD40s and stuff, you could probably put 6 units on the head end, but with these newer units, they make so much horsepower. 4 would be my max, and I think it was even 3 in real life. So these are all things to kind of keep in mind if you're really looking to run a realistic railroad. You don't have to go this far. It obviously doesn't matter in the game physics. But let's call it 4. So this would be your typical stack train. Now this is probably be actually a pretty short stack train for today's standards, but back in 1994, this was probably your average stack train right here. We're in 1994 at the moment, that's why I say that. So let's make a more modern stack train. So typically, we'll make a 10,000 foot stack train. Okay, I was kind of been pondering this video over the last day or so, and for the game's sake, if you have a 10,000 foot train, stack train that is, in this game, typically you're going to want to put some mid-train DPUs about 2/3 of the way through it, or what I would consider about 7,000 feet. So let's build this train to 7,000 feet and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, 7,200, we'll call it that. So the reason why we're going to have a 10,000 foot train, so we got 4 units on the head end, 7,000 feet plus through the way of the train, we're going to put, we'll call it 3 more units, and then we will build the train up to 10,000 feet after that. Now why you don't want to have these units exactly halfway through the train, it's because they're not only pulling the rest of the train, but they're pushing it as well. So we will grab, I'll make it a little interesting. They don't have to be correct here with facing forward or not. So not only are these units pulling the rest of the train, but they're pushing the first 2/3 of the train as well. So if you put these units in real life exactly halfway through the train, you can jackknife the train because you have power pulling from the head end, pushing from the middle, which could cause the train to jackknife in the middle. Somewhere around the 25% through the train. So let's say we have a 10,000 foot train, around 2,500 foot you can risk having a jackknife or derailing because there's just too much pressure pulling and pushing that close together. So typically you'd space it out about 2/3 of the way through the train. There's an exact calculation to find out exactly where you need it, depending on the weight and the length and the drawbars and the knuckles and all that stuff. We won't get into that because that's way too advanced for this game. But general rule of thumb, 2/3 of the way through, or if you're going to make a 10,000 foot long container train, stack train, intermodal train, just put it in here around the 7,000 foot mark. Okay, so then we'll go back here. That's all the way to the top. And we will finish it off to 10,000 feet. Okay, so this would be a realistic train build for this game and for real life. There'd obviously, like I said, be more mathematics involved to figure out exactly where and when and all that good stuff. But if we're going to do a 10,000 foot train, this would be it. 7 units going up this grade, which is the grade's pretty much maxed out the majority of this route that I built on the Tehachapi. It'd probably take 7 units to get it up at a somewhat decent speed. I'm talking 15 to 20 miles an hour. That's pretty good on the UP, believe it or not. Okay, if we're going to go, let's say, to a 2 mile long train, well, I guess we're close enough to 2 mile long. I've had a stacked train that was 15,300 feet. Keep that in mind. Luckily, it was all empty, but we did have to put mid-train DPUs, two of them, about 2/3 of the way back of the whole train. Empty, by the way, to keep it from breaking in half. So keep that in mind. An empty intermodal train, 3 miles long, still had to have mid-train DPUs. So if you're going to make, let's say, a 12,000 foot long intermodal train on this game, I would put these maybe a little bit farther back. I'd probably put them at like 8,000 feet, right? But we're still kind of keeping around that 2/3 idea. I wouldn't want to put them too far back. I think 9,000 feet would be a little too much if we're doing it for realism. And then I would, for a 12,000 footer, then we need something to help that mid-train DPU because they're pushing and pulling. We need something to help them on this last third of the train so this doesn't break and that there's enough power. So then we would do this. Okay, so that's if we had a 12,000 footer. This is what I would do. So yeah, so here's just some things to think about. I know sometimes when we add DPUs in this game, it changes the train to be able to go in reverse, which means the train doesn't turn around. So now your two DPUs is the head of the train, and that looks like crap. So sometimes it has an issue with that, so I kind of keep my DPUs on the end of the train facing forward, and most of the time it doesn't make the train able to reverse. So for just some giggles, let's go here. Go on the Mojave sub, that's the main one. So we got this local coming into the yard, which is why he's not leaving yet. Ah, here's some of my patches. And we got the weathered SD9. Here, over here is the Shell Oil Seco in Seco, California. This is where the famous SP oil cans would come out of Seco up over Tehachapi and down in the Long Beach. So I included that. Once this local leaves, we will be able to see the train pull out. Let's see if I can get... Nope. When I make a big map and have a lot of things going on, I lose ability to increase the speed of the game. I can't fast forward or nothing, so that's kind of funny. Got some pretty good detail on this route. So yeah, make sure to check it out and add whatever else you want to on your own time. So let's click on this train and see. Drive backwards, no, so that's good. This is something you got to keep an eye on, because when you put DPUs on the end of the train, a lot of times they'll say yes, and then it screws it up. So I like seeing that. That's why it helps to put the DPUs forward facing. So a little trick there if you're having that problem. So I'm just trying to go along in my head here and see if there's anything else I can address when it comes to realistic train builds. What is going on here? Huh. Some of my mods were deleted, so this is what happens. So if I click on this, driving backwards, no. So this clearly needs more locomotives. I think that's what's going on here. We'll fix that at a later time. Here we got sand cut. It used to be an old helper spur track, so that's what we got here. Man, everybody's jammed up because of this train. Jammed up. Jammed up. So anyways, getting back to my original point, I think this is all I could really think of for the moment as I tweak this. Yeah, 1 unit, that's awesome. So here's a little pro tip on how to fix things without screwing up your train. Then you add more. And then you have to put these back up here. If you drop everything down, it will read it as a new train and all your loads will go bye-bye. So there we go. What do you think of these patches? Like I said, these are for personal use for right now. Yeah. I'm not sure if I will be doing any more reskins for public use in the future. I'd like to, but we'll see. What I like about this route is it's jointly shared, right? It was built and owned by the SP, now the UP, but you got the Santa Fe using it, later BNSF, so that makes it kind of fun to have a little bit of diversity. It's not just one railroad. So, anyways, guys, I hope you liked the video. I hope this maybe answered some questions or maybe brought some things to your attention that you didn't know before. My goal is to always try to bring a realistic experience to this game for you guys. And if you have any other things you would like to see when it comes to this topic or anything else, throw them in the comments. I want to see what you guys have to say. I'm always looking for ideas. You guys made me aware of waypoint signals so you could actually use them. I didn't know that. Haha. Even though I was still able to make my routes and able to do directional traffic without them, it's always good to know. I'm always learning new stuff from you guys. So yeah, comment below, like, share to anybody that you think will enjoy this. And yeah, I appreciate it. One last thing, here's the oil can train from Bakersfield that we used to have on the SP. And I have, once again, in real life, this train required mid-train helpers all the way up the grade. So I basically just leave them in the train even when they're empty because there's no way to really cut in helpers or anything, as we know. So once again, they are about 2/3 of the way through the train. So that's basically a common rule that you could live by when it comes to mid-train helpers in this case, or DPUs. So one last little side note there. I'll give you a little look-see on this route. I worked real hard on this route, let me tell you. Got all the tunnels here. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. Even colored it with a little bit of coal to simulate the smoke buildup. Got Tehachapi here. Some older industries. Got real industries. Tehachapi cement, which is there in real life. And then we descend back down in the desert. Not getting any sound on my SD40, so that's kind of strange, but whatever. Down here to Mojave, and we got the portal system, which I do on my maps. Border right here, industry right here. There's a cutoff for the Santa Fe, but it's just basically for looks. Got the Mojave local. I even built in Trona. I feel like that'd be a cool little addition to this route. We just had the coal train drop off some coal to Trona like they do in real life. So yeah, I'm gonna need to make as much of a life-size route as I can for Trona. I think that'd be fun, and try to make the mine itself like it is. That would be a challenge, so look for that in the future. Currently working on the best map I've ever made, putting in a ton of detail, and it's turning out great so far. So hopefully in the not too distant future that'll come out. And yeah, stay tuned, fellas. Thanks for everything. We'll talk to you guys later.